Value Impulses with Dr. Ulrich Vogel. Personal diagnostics insights, leadership, assessments, and personnel development. A warm welcome to you, dear listener, once again here with us at Value Impulses. We want to provide added value for you, for consultants, coaches, trainers, HR professionals, and leaders. And today, I've brought along an interesting topic. Today's topic is reporting, in other words, reporting back to your client, with the somewhat provocative title, Why You Need to Speak Plainly When Reporting to Your Client. First off, tachelles, that's a word we know from everyday language. I looked it up to see where it actually comes from. It comes from Yiddish. Tachelles ultimately means goal or purpose, but in terms of its meaning, it's about speaking openly, directly, and bluntly, without any false consideration or beating around the bush. And yes, it's usually about discussing tricky topics and speaking plainly about them. So, I think we can use tachelles and plain talk as synonyms here. Why reporting, and what do I mean by reporting? There are all sorts of different situations. For example, I might have done coaching with someone over half a year, and then the client wants a report. Or I might have done a profiling session with someone, and in that case, the client might just want to have a quick 5-minute chat with me. Or, I might have done an assessment, looking at a very specific position, where there was a briefing beforehand, we carried it out, and then the reporting follows. So, there are a lot of different scenarios where a report is called for. All of that is included here, although at certain points I also specifically go into particular situations, into typical scenarios. What really stands out, and as an introduction, is that the goal of reporting is not just to inform the client, but to actually create real added value. Whether you're in HR reporting to a line manager, or you're a coach reporting to your client or principal, not the coachee, regardless of whether it's internal, external, or as a service provider. Just providing information on its own, that's not enough. Sure, it connects things, that's true, but it's through your expertise and the way you report that real added value is created. And the goal is to provide clear feedback, no sugarcoating, because that's what the client values in the long run. So, don't just tell them what they want to hear. That's an old saying from politicians, don't just tell the people what they want to hear, but really pay attention to what they're saying. That's an important distinction, and by the way, you can also apply that as a consultant or even to companies. Paying attention to what people are saying means really noticing what concerns the employees, what's going on in the company, but not just telling them what they want to hear. As a leader, a service provider, or in HR, you have to form your own opinion and stand by it clearly. Let's dive into the first point I mentioned, focusing on the big points instead of overloading. Of course, you can write massive reports, but in most cases, they just don't get read. So, anything longer than 3 pages, or maybe 4, in my view or based on my experience over 25 years, just doesn't get read. I actually try, in almost all cases, to keep it to 2 pages. Sometimes it ends up being 3, but more than that really only happens in exceptional cases. There can be exceptions where, I don't know, a 12-page report is necessary. For example, I have a partner who does really in-depth assessments, so the client says the person needs to be thoroughly checked from top to bottom, with references, spending 2 days with them, with, all sorts of case studies and whatever else, either to be thoroughly assessed or to be developed further. Of course, that kind of thing is also in the price range of, 5 figures. That's necessary in those cases, but when we're talking about regular, let's say, assignments, like filling positions, where we support, or where it's about profiling for determining someone's current status, or an assessment, or whatever, the typical things. That's what I mean. That's where we need big points. And I'm talking about 5 key points, give or take. Of course, they can have subpoints, and the trick is to weave a bit of a structure out of that, a main structure, a substructure, and ultimately even turn it into a story. And why the big points? Well, it's about the important content. Of course, the client isn't as deeply involved as we are when we're carrying this out. It's about selecting and presenting important content concisely. And that helps avoid overwhelming the client and, of course, also increases clarity. But there's something like insight filtration, that's what I like to call it. Not all results are big points. So, of course, we have to specifically choose what brings the most value. But sometimes we also have to let go of some side effects or smaller things, so to speak. So, in oral reporting, it's really important. This is what's called reading between the lines, and, yeah, in the spoken word, that's a typical way of putting it. But you can also, in written reporting, drop something in a subordinate clause that maybe gives an idea of how deeply you got into things with someone and what you might have learned about a candidate or participant. So you can make a bit of noise there, too. That's also part of the job, to show how deeply you got involved. Now, there's a point that's very close to my heart when it comes to reporting, and that's what I call the download principle. So, if I've done a profiling where I have to write a summary afterwards, or I've conducted a 90-minute or 2-hour assessment interview and need to put it in writing, I can only advise you to go straight into drafting the reporting, immediately after the conversation. Capture your impressions right away. The risk of losing information is huge. You'll never get it down as accurately as you would if you do the download right after. That's why I call it that, straight from your brain, and also from your gut feeling, just right out of your hand, if you do it immediately. So when I'm in that situation, I don't look at an email, I don't check my phone, nothing at all, yeah. No messages, absolutely no distractions, go straight into it. And then, in terms of quality, this report is unbeatable. Yeah, the benefit is this immediate clarity and availability. You get a level of accuracy and expressiveness that you'll never reach again later on. And of course, it's a first draft that I'm doing there, and usually I sleep on it for a night, and then I read through it again, or basically proofread it once more. And after the first draft, it might sit for a bit longer and I refine it a little later on. If I have the time for the first draft, and then still have a bit of time afterwards, then I'll refine it right away and then sleep on it. So I really recommend immediate documentation to you. The structure in reporting, what do I mean by that? I like to call it the overarching 3-step approach. I already touched on it earlier. It's about the 3-step briefing, so, the client describes the situation, the purpose, the goal of the whole thing, then comes the implementation, of the assessment, the profiling, the format, whatever it may be, the coaching, and then, finally, the third point, the reporting, right? So it has to be simple and easy to follow. The client understands the process and the approach. So this 3-step approach is actually very, very important for any kind of consulting when it comes to human resources. And that leads to it being targeted, meaning that the relevant information is presented in a logical and meaningful context. Let's take a look at the media mix that we have available today. As I said, from a quick 5-minute phone call to a meaningful report. But more and more, there are also audio and video presentations, which I do from time to time, and in some cases more often. Some clients like that. So that's why it's really important to also adapt a bit to the preferences of the client. Although, in my experience, an audio or a video is often gladly accepted because you can take it in quickly, but, it usually doesn't get archived as well. The old saying still holds true, if you write it down, it stays. So a written report is something permanent, and of course, for us as the ones reporting, especially with profiling values, where you really get deep insights and also provide good development recommendations, it's very valuable. So that if you look at it again a year or even 2 years later, and you have 2 pages, and maybe you also open the profiling values report from the system and sit down for 15 or 20 minutes, then it should all come back to you in your mind's eye. Then, what should happen is that you think, okay, what have I actually done in those 1 or 2 years with the development impulses that were in there? Another important point is the business context, the language of the client. If there's one thing I hate, and I know a lot of clients don't like it either, it's reports that are just packed with psychological jargon. Where you get the feeling, okay, this was a psychological institute, and, it's all about these personality traits, but where's the business relevance? It's just not there at all. So we need the jargon, as well, the client's language and the client's culture. There needs to be a certain sense of belonging, and there absolutely has to be the business link. Just talking about a person, what they're like, how they should develop, and so on and so forth, that's all well and good, but the connection to the client's business, that's what matters. The client has specific reasons for wanting to achieve certain results. That has to fit. And maybe one more point about these foreign words, or rather this, let's call it academic jargon that psychologists often use, but of course, so do other disciplines. My grandfather once put it very nicely. Using foreign words is always a bit of a gamble. So, folks, try to be clear, and also, keep it in German, don't make it too complicated. Sure, most of the time the client knows you can do it, but, in the end, it really doesn't make things any easier to read or understand, yeah. So, please take a holistic view here, keep the business context and the client's language in mind, from the objectives right through to the recommendations, create a coherent thread, and ideally, turn it into a story. And now, once again, let me stress, have the courage to be honest. No sugarcoating, please, yeah. Address uncomfortable truths, communicate critical points transparently. I explained the word Tacheles earlier. There are always risks, yeah. But look, let's take a job placement as an example. If we don't really dig deep and properly assess the risks, yeah. And 6 months later, it turns out, oh dear, it's not a good fit, but if we can point out that these risks were there, then we're on the safe side and we're, thorough and, competent. On the other hand, if we pointed out the risks and paid attention to them during the probation period, in the end you can say, yeah, that was a good heads up, otherwise we might have hit a wall here. Yeah. So, and then always take a clear position. We can't beat around the bush, as service providers, as consultants, but also internally as someone who provides an assessment. Clarity builds trust, even when the results are tough. Please, don't backpedal, okay? But of course, you have to allow for the possibility of mistakes. Yeah, decisions, especially personnel decisions, can never be 100% certain. We're dealing with people, not machines. Still, we have to weigh as many facts as possible and then take a position, take a stand, yeah. And, see courage as a strength here. The client expects honesty, and in the long run, they really benefit from direct communication. So, to sum it up, clarity and conciseness in reporting, that's the real gift to the client, yeah. They truly appreciate that. And now maybe a call to action for you, dear listener. I'd like to encourage you, take a moment to reflect on your own reporting practices. See if there's anything you might be able to improve. Come to us and discuss it with us. Give us your feedback. I think, as I'm talking about this, I should probably make a post about reporting so we can maybe get a discussion going on LinkedIn as well. So, thank you very much for your valuable time that you've spent listening to this episode all the way to the end. I'm looking forward to the upcoming episodes and hope you'll be tuning in as a listener. Thank you so much, and see you very soon. Bye.